Coming up in the next Unknown Pleasures series of films, screening, in fact, next week, July 18th, is a film called Call Me Mum. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the writer of Call Me Mum, Kathleen Mary Fallon, and the director, Margot Nash. Welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Hi. Great to be here. Hi.
This is such a fascinating story about, I suppose it has stolen generation aspects to it, and about a birth mother, foster mother, Torres Strait Islander. I mean, it deals with a number of issues. How did the film or the telemovie first come about?
Kathleen.
That's me. I've been thinking about it. I've been, now that it's on again, I've been immersed in memories. It came about because I'm, writing various genres and mediums, and I absolutely loved Alan Bennett's monologues. And I really felt politically, I really care about free-to-air telly. And I also was very influenced by Dennis Potter's, Pennies from Heaven and Singing Detective. I mean, really good free-to-air TV, which the general unwashed public deserve. So, hang on. And so I thought, I never ever had the hubris to think I could write a film, but I thought I could write monologues. So I wrote I pitched. I knew one person at SBS Independent many years ago, so I pitched the idea of these monologues to SBS Independent. Bridget Icahn, Debbie Lee loved the idea. I put in a submission, they accepted it. So then I wrote the 4 monologues, which took about years to get them right. And then a decision was made higher up, I won't go into, that, oh no, make it a movie. All you need to do is cut and paste. I said, no, complete conceptual rethink. But anyway, that's how the movie happened, because a new CEO, sorry, that keeps coming out. A new CEO came on board at SBS, wanted a movie. So then I had to go back and reconceptualize the whole thing. And so Call Me Mum became 90 minutes.
Okay. And yes, telemovie. And I found that so interesting. The in some respects fairly brave, that sort of monologues to camera, etc. And yet it flows very well as a film. So Margot, let me ask you, in directing Kathleen's script and monologues and so on, what were the challenges you faced there?
Well, the challenges were getting the performances in a single take. And whereas some of the actors, people like Catherine McClements, who plays Kate, and Lynette Curran, who plays Delmay, Kate's mother, they're very experienced actors, and they're trained, so they have tools and so to work with. So they were really interesting to work with in terms of from a directing point of view. But the 2 Torres Strait Islander characters, the boy, Dayne Christian, was untrained, and he was pure gut, like he did it. When we met him, we went on a casting trip up to Mackay and Townsville and Brisbane and Cairns and Torres Strait Islands to find those 2 characters. And we found him in Mackay, and he did a fabulous audition. But it was all gut. And and Vicki Saylor, who plays, it's my silly email still on.
Sorry.
Vicki Saylor, who plays Flo, Warren's mother, his birth mother, she was a singer. And so she had performance skills because she'd been a singer, she'd performed, she'd been on stage, but she didn't have acting. She had no training as an actor either. And she was all gut too, you know. So the thing about working with untrained actors is that the first take, they'll give you what they've got. And if you try and get it a second time, you're likely not to get it. And you might go through 20 takes. And if you're lucky, you'll get it on the last one. So I knew that working with untrained actors was going to be tricky. And so I did quite extensive workshops with all the actors, but I really focused on those two. So to give them some skills to work with on set. So they needed to, I did improvisational work with them. So I put them in situations so they knew their backstories. So on set, I could say to Vicki, now remember when this happened and now you're remembering that. And she had a memory. She would have a memory of the rehearsal, of the improvisation where we'd gone through that. And she could remember that. And the boy the same. So, you know, they needed a lot of close work, I suppose. And I, with Vicki in particular, because the mother was in hospital, and so she spends the whole film lying in a hospital bed and talking, you know, the monologue, talking to herself, thinking about how she's going to deal with meeting her son, who she hasn't seen for a very long time. So I would kind of lower my voice and I would go up close to her and I would speak her into the moment. And this is what's happening, and remember what, you know. So I'd bring her into the memories, and I wasn't, you know, the thing about when you're directing a film, you've got a big crew there, and it's very public. So I had to try and make it very private and very quiet on the set. And so instead of saying, you know, action, cut, you know, I just say, well, okay, so can we roll? And when you're ready, Vicki, just go. And so it was.
Sorry, darling. Do you remember the day that you got them all to make her feel good? You got all the crew and everyone to wear sort of leis and skirts and stuff, and so that she'd feel surrounded by her Torres Strait.
They were all the crew came. I don't think I did that. They did that. I think there was. I can't remember how it happened, but the crew came out in leis and grass skirts, all these big burly blokes and everything. It was really, they were so gorgeous, and also Vicki's a very devout Christian, and so she would do. She would every morning on set, if she was on, she would do a prayer and bless the crew, and so she would create.
They all had to stand and pray with her. That's right.
What's that?
They all had to stand and sort of hold hands and pray with her in a circle. It was so good.
So that was, you know, I think when the problem with the monologues was sometimes I didn't get it. You know, like mainly I got it, and I knew that the first take was the really important one, and trying to repeat it, that you could ask Catherine McClements to repeat and she would make it better, or you could ask Lynette for another take and she would improve. She'd give her one direction, a couple of or two, but with an untrained actor, it's very hard. And also for untrained actors, and I learned this in a workshop that I did, they can't deal with props very easily, particularly with you trying to remember that long monologue. And Vicki had this sort of box that she opened with all these things, and it was very hard for her to keep the character and keep the gaze and do something with props. So I tried to minimise the props. So I mean, something must have worked, because she got an AFI Award for best female actress in a television drama, so I must have done something right. And so to bring her out, you know, to get those takes.
And that was after people said to me, as though we were looking for directors and when we were looking for money, some people were saying, oh, you'll never get Torres Strait actors. We'll have to use Aboriginal actors, which defeated the whole thing. And for Vicki to get an AFI award was so special.
Fantastic, that's right. But there was also stuff that went on in the editing room of, you know, going through 20 takes and looking for a word or a phrase and lip syncing it in because the original one hadn't worked. So there was some fine work that was done later, but it all worked. And I thought it worked anyway, and I thought her performance was fabulous. And so it was a challenge.
It was. Look, congratulations on that, because I think the film works really well, and it's remarkable to see how you worked with everyone. And I must also mention Ross Thompson, who's there with Lynette Curran, playing a rather interesting character.
Well, he was amazing. I thought he did a fantastic job. His performance was great. You know,
there's another aspect that I wanted to say too about why I wrote the monologues and then the film. I did a hell of a lot of research on Torres Strait culture, history and so forth. Read Noni Sharp's wonderful book, Stars of Tagai. And I went to Torres Strait 3 times and worked with an elder called Ephraim Barney. But the thing about the Torres Strait culture, I had to get it right. You know, it wasn't a matter, I couldn't just have some bright ideas about, I had to get it right, because one of the things with Torres Strait culture is the return of the story, reciprocity. And I wanted that story, the story of Henry, to go back to the islands. So that reciprocity wouldn't have worked unless I'd got it tickety-boo, like. And I went,
Kathleen, I think there's a missing link here, that Henry is your real foster son from the Torres Strait, and the boy in the film, whose name is Warren, is based on your true story. Well, I don't think Peter knows that.
No.
So I'm just bringing Peter and the audience into the narrative, which was that Kathleen did foster a little boy from the Torres Strait Islands who was very disabled, and brought him up and took him back to the Torres Strait. So the film is a fiction, but it's not a fiction. It's based on a true story, but it has been fictionalized at the end, in particular in terms of the narrative. But it's embedded within Kathleen's direct experience as a white foster mother.
Yeah. Sorry, thank you, Margot.
Yes.
But also, I had my foster son, because of his disabilities. I mean, he was really smart. He was amazing, but he was illiterate and innumerate, and he was visually impaired and so forth. But he got totally confused about the Stolen Generations stories. And I wanted also to give him back publicly in a film his story, so that he could, because he was such a people pleaser. As soon as he said, oh, I was fostered, I was sitting beside him. People would go, oh, you poor thing, are you part of the stolen generation? And he'd go, yeah. And he'd tell stories about how badly treated he was. And I was there. His white foster parents had done this.
Had stolen him, but they had.
Oh, yes. And people would go, oh, you poor thing, let me buy you an orange juice. And I'd be sitting there, and then he'd go, yeah, they used to keep me down the back in a dog kennel and feed me slop in a bowl. You know, like, and they go, oh, that's terrible, you poor thing. Yeah, I've told you those stories, Margot. So
yeah, I know. But I knew Henry. When I was working on the film, I spent quite a lot of time with Henry, and he was a trickster, and he was fabulous. He was very funny and witty, and everybody loved Henry. He's passed away now, which is very sad. But he would go into those kind of narratives
Yeah.
Because it brought him attention too, and orange juice. But it wasn't
food.
Let
me buy you a meal. Would you like a hamburger? Let me drive you home, you poor disabled boy. Oh boy.
The stories, there's many stories about Henry.
But I wanted to give him his story, you know, and also send it back to the Torres Strait via a film. So that was also part of the reason that and also, as I say, mine has been virtually the only voice of the white adoptive foster parent in the cultural landscape of Australia until this recent wonderful film, The Last Daughter.
Yes.
Brenda Matthews, wonderful film. So maybe now we're going to get those stories, those I connected with a lot of foster adoptive white parents, and the stories are incredible. Honestly, they're the most traumatized group of people I've ever come in contact with, and they weren't allowed to speak. You know, they were either abusive fathers or foster adoptive fathers, or kind of nutty white mothers who were sort of dealing with their pathological maternity or something, and they're silenced. Our group totally silenced and traumatized. But Brenda Matthews' film might start making a prints. But yeah, that's another reason I wanted to write it.
It's a beautiful film. It's a beautiful film. I just saw it, and you know, the white foster family, the grief they felt when she was taken away from them and sent back to her Aboriginal family, the grief the Aboriginal mother felt. It was those levels of complexity in that film I thought were fantastic. And one of the things I loved about the script that Kathleen wrote about Henry's story, which is Warren in the film, was that level of complexity. You know, it wasn't, sorry to be cliched, black and white. You know, it wasn't. It was a complex, layered story, and everybody in the story. You know, I always felt there was a longing, a yearning for something else in all of their narratives. And they were all very isolated, and the monologues isolated them. And I was reading something Kathleen had written recently, trying to come back into the world of Call Me Mum. And Kathleen talked about the loneliness that, you know, the white foster mother has this loneliness, the boy has a loneliness, but there's a longing, the longing to connect with his birth mother. The birth mother has a loneliness and a longing. But, you know, so there's everybody has this sort of complexity. And one of the things that I think is so powerful about the monologues, and I love the Alan Bennett monologues too, is that the subtext of the narrative is sitting on the surface. So all the secrets that people have been holding are named in the monologue, because they're speaking this very intimate voice straight to you, the audience, but it's as though you're in the room with them and they're telling you a secret. So when characters are next to each other, most of the time they're not telling the truth in films, you know, and there's subtext under the surface. But the monologues, the truth comes out, and there is truth telling. The way there is in The Last Daughter, there's this sort of truth telling that happens that actually brings about a reconciliation. And I think there's a truth telling that's in Call Me Mum that's deeply uncomfortable for everyone. And the film, you know, has had, you know, people who think it's marvellous and people who find it very uncomfortable. But there is a truth-telling and a longing for reconciliation and for respect and naming of what has happened, and a way to bring people together and tell their stories.
And the other thing in The Last Daughter, which is is in Call Me Mum, not highlighted, but what happens when that white family and the black family get together? The fucking lies come out. The lies, like I was told. The lies about that, both families. I was told, when I tried to connect Henry up years before, was, they'll only want money. And they were told, his black family were told, oh, he's a vegetable and some stupid white do-gooder's taken him on. That was just...
And Henry, I loved Henry's response to that. He said, what kind of vegetable? A cabbage?
I read everything. I read everything to Henry. And we sat for ages one day and I read Warren's part. And he sat there nodding, listening. And I said, is there anything you want to take out or you want me to add? He's so smart. He says, no, the only thing I want you to put in, Kath, he said, is it's family if they help you and it's not family if they don't. And I think I did put that in. I think that's in there. So he was involved in every bit of it, you know.
Yep. Well, congratulations. Yes. Sorry, Margot, keep going.
Oh, well, when we were making the film, Henry used to ring Kathleen up, and if she wasn't there, he'd leave a message on her phone and he'd say, can you call me, Mum? Because the film was called Call Me Mum. You know, so he was so witty.
That's right.
Can you call me, Mum?
And
He used to call me Margot Nash.
He only called me Mum when the social workers are there or when I was being them, you know, doing the parents and teacher night. Then I was my mother. But the rest of the time he called me Kathleen. Yeah, he was so cluey.
How incredible. So this film was made in 2005 and it's remarkably prescient. As you mentioned, The Last Daughter, and I spoke to the filmmaker and did a Q&A with her as well. It's incredible the stories that came out there. So, but anyway, Call Me Mum. I must also mention the cinematography because it's a fairly contained film, of course, shot in a plane, shot in a hospital room, and shot in a house. But Andrew de Groot's cinematography and David Bridie's music add, I think, so much to the film.
Yes. David Bridie's music was beautiful, and Vicki sings those songs. There's Torres Strait Islander songs. That's Vicki Saylor singing them. And but Andrew de Groot had a beautiful line. He was very meticulous about, because we had to sort of create that sort of very stylized world. But that was also created by the production designer too. Creating that. Like think about Delma and Keith's world, you know, the parents there, that was created in a set. We shot the whole thing in a studio, so there were sets that were created. The plane was a set and we projected stuff outside the windows, so we had to get this sort of sense of heightened reality. So the set for Delma and Keith's was like really long, so you could get that sense of distance between them. So there were all sorts of interesting things like that the designer and the cinematographer brought to the project.
Excellent stuff. It's and it's great to see the film being screened on Tuesday at the Thornbury Picture House. Now, will both of you be there at the screening?
Yeah. Doing a Q&A afterwards, aren't we, Margot?
Yes. And the film has been remastered.
Yes.
Hasn't been restored because not filmed. It was shot on videotape on, you know, SP Betacam. I take that back. I can't remember what it was shot on, but it was. It doesn't matter. But it's been remastered, so we could make a digital version to put up on the big screen. So I'm dying to see it on the big screen.
Yeah, and Andrew de Groot's work, you know, although it was made sort of for TV, I guess. But when, you know, we saw it at the Sydney Film Festival all those years ago and other screenings, and it works because of the work he did. It's so beautiful, even on the big screen. You know, it's still better in a way. But will I tell Peter that little story about? It has had screenings. The premiere screening was up in Townsville, hey Margot?
Oh yeah, that was fantastic.
Visitor Centre.
I think we were about almost the only white people there. You know, it was just Torres Strait Islanders and Aboriginal mob. It was just a fabulous screening.
And we looked out, and you know, it was just lines and lines of elders all sitting, looking, you know, like And I said to Margot, shit, if they don't like it, we just get
Right.
out. Bit of Thornbury two on the back of the head. But they loved it. And but the people who organised that screening and paid for it was friends of Vicki Saylor's, because she came from Townsville. And they were two gay guys who ran the sex shops in Townsville. Remember that? And as we were being driven from the airport with Vicki and these two guys, we drove past all their sex shops, and they told us all the statistics about how much KY jelly was sold in Townsville and what were the most favoured sex toys. And they said, oh my God.
Moving right along.
We had some moving right along. We had some wild times with the film, that's for sure. Look, the thing that I'm just remembering, I think is really interesting, you know, when Kathleen was talking about going up and doing the research on Thursday Island, the Torres Strait, and working with Ephraim Barney and wanting to get everything right. Michael McMahon, who's the producer of the film, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but he and I went on that casting trip up to the Torres Strait, and we, looking for the character of Flo, we screen tested quite a lot of old ladies up there, and they were senior women, some of them, and the we found they corrected us on a few things.
Yeah.
Remember that, Kathleen? Because, you know,
I don't remember that, but they would have.
They did. And so we chose, I chose some scenes for them to, I remember choosing the scenes. I think we talked about it, Kathleen, that you were a bit unsure about, and let's make sure we get this right. So I chose those scenes to screen test. And a couple of them said, no, that's wrong, or that's right, or whatever. So we were able to actually get it better, get it right in terms culturally better.
Yeah.
English, but that's what we did through sharing it during that time when we were looking for the characters and screen testing. And I can't remember what it was now, but there was a couple of things that went, oh, better fix that. And so that was really fantastic.
It's all very serious, you know, how you actually say things, and like using terms like wari tebud, like the wari tebud, where Flo says, oh, I'll make you my wari tebud. That's a very serious thing to make somebody. That's like making them family. And also in those days, I didn't know anything about Islander adoption, you know, and nowadays Islander adoption is legitimate, and you know, it's Islander, you know, where one family they'll have a kid and they will give it to another family to raise, and that was with Eddie Mabo. That had happened with Eddie Mabo. Now that child knows that that family is their birth family, but they grow up as part of this family, and I didn't realise that was how I could have been, and was to an extent, incorporated into my foster son's family. They saw me as it was Islander adoption, but we were also ignorant in those days about Islander culture. It didn't dawn on me until I was writing. That's why it's called Call Me Mum, because they called me Mum.
Okay.
And in the monologue Flo, she's got the shell, the water shell, and she says, I'll give her this shell. I'll make her my wari tebud, and then she will become part of my family, and I'll call her mum and she'll call me mum.
Yeah.
Okay.
A beautiful shell, yeah.
What terrific stories about the making of the film and the backstory and your own situation, Kathleen, and so on. It's so very interesting. My Zoom is about to run out, so I'd better conclude. But it's so interesting to hear these stories about such a really interesting film, Call Me Mum, which is screening Tuesday at I think it's 6:10 at the Thornbury, the Thornbury Picture House.
6:10, the earlier time of 6:10.
Yes, on the dot. And Kathleen and Margot will be there. So I certainly recommend everyone sees the film if and the remastered Call Me Mum, and we've been speaking to the director Margot Nash and the writer Kathleen Mary Fallon. Congratulations on the film. I hope Tuesday night goes well.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Peter.
Great to talk to you both. Okay, thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.